All right, so are you ready to unlock some rental property investing secrets? We're going deep today into the book on rental property investing. It's supposed to be like the ultimate guide, your roadmap to building wealth. So we'll see if it lives up to that.
Let's jump right in, no time to waste. What are some of the questions this book tackles that you think will be really useful for our listener today?
This book really sets out to answer those big questions like, can you really build wealth through rentals? How much money do you actually need to get started? And are there like hidden opportunities that most people miss?
The classic real estate myths versus reality. I like it. And so, where does this book suggest we even begin? Like, what's step one on our journey to real estate moguldom?
It all starts with what the author calls flipping the switch, basically moving from a can't do to a how can I mindset. He really emphasizes that this mental shift is like super crucial for overcoming those initial hurdles that come with real estate investing.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can imagine that limiting beliefs, things like not having enough money, can be a huge roadblock for people who want to get started. Does the book offer any practical advice for overcoming this?
It actually dives right into that with a personal story from the author. He was initially feeling like paralyzed by this belief that he didn't have enough money to invest. But then he discovered the power of leverage, essentially using borrowed capital to really amplify your return.
It's like using a lever to lift something way heavier than you could with just your own strength, right?
Yeah.
So can you give an example of how that works in real estate?
So imagine finding a property for $100,000, right? Instead of needing the entire sum up front, you could secure, say, an 80% loan from a lender. That means you only need $20,000 for a down payment. So that's leverage in action.
I love that illustration. It really shows how leverage can make real estate investing so much more accessible. But I'm sure our listeners thinking, hold on, doesn't more leverage also mean you're taking on more risk?
Oh, you're spot on. And the book addresses that head on. It basically argues that knowledge is really the key to mitigating those inherent risks of leverage. The more you understand the market, your specific investment, and just like the ins and outs of property management, the more informed decisions you can make.
Got it. So it's not just about like piling on as much debt as possible, but more about using leverage strategically while minimizing risk. Okay, so you've got the right mindset, a basic understanding of leverage. What's next? How do you actually build a successful real estate investing business?
Well, the book uses a really interesting analogy here. It compares building a real estate team to Muhammad Ali's victory in that legendary Thrilla in Manila boxing match.
Whoa, that's kind of an unexpected comparison. I'm intrigued. What's the connection?
So while Ali was undoubtedly the champion in the ring, his victory was also because of his incredible team. His coach, Angelo Dundee especially, he always had his cornermen like guiding and supporting him through every single round.
So the takeaway is that even the greatest individuals, they need a strong team to achieve those like really extraordinary results.
Okay.
Okay, how does that translate to real estate?
So the book introduces what it calls the Big Five. These are the essential members of your real estate A-team. And first up, it's your spouse or partner. Having their support and understanding is just absolutely crucial, especially as you navigate all the ups and downs of real estate investing.
Yeah, having a united front at home can definitely make a huge difference. So who else is on this dream team?
Next, you absolutely need a mentor. Someone who's been there, done that, can provide that invaluable guidance, real insights based on their own experience. Then there's your real estate agent, someone who really understands your investment goals and can help you unearth those hidden gems in the market.
Makes sense. Now, what about financing? I'm assuming a good lender makes this all-star team.
Oh, absolutely. Securing the right financing, it's critical. So finding a lender who gets your vision and is willing to work with you is key. And finally, no real estate A-team is complete without a reliable contractor. The book actually acknowledges that finding skilled and trustworthy workers can be a major challenge, but it's just so essential for turning your investment dreams into a reality.
Finding good contractors can feel like searching for a needle in a haystack, honestly. So does the book offer any practical tips for vetting potential contractors?
It does. First, tap into your network. Ask around. See if other investors have recommendations for reliable contractors they've worked with before. Online reviews, especially on platforms like Bigger Pockets, those can also be really helpful.
Smart. Leverage the experiences of others. Anything else?
Yeah, look for contractors who actually specialize in rehabbing rental properties. They have a different mindset and approach than those contractors who just focus on flipping houses. Their priority is to create durable and functional spaces for long-term tenants, not just those quick cosmetic fixes to flip it.
I hadn't really thought about that distinction before. That's a great point. Any other insider tips?
The book suggests a really clever trick, actually. Ask other subcontractors for recommendations. So, for example, if you're looking for a good electrician, ask a plumber or a drywaller who they like to work with. They often have real firsthand insights into the quality and reliability of other tradespeople.
That's brilliant, like getting the inside scoop. So you mentioned the big five, but are there any other key players that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, definitely some important supporting roles to consider, like an accountant or a CPA to help you navigate the financial side of things, an attorney to provide legal guidance, and an insurance agent to protect your investment. And then, depending on your strategy and how involved you want to be, you might also want to think about a property manager.
Which brings us to the often debated topic of property management. I bet our listeners wondering, like, is it better to manage properties yourself or hire a pro?
That's a big question, and we'll definitely dive deeper into the pros and cons later. But for now, let's move on to another crucial aspect of real estate investing, which is financing. The book actually compares getting a loan approved to cracking a secret code, which I thought was pretty intriguing.
Okay, the mystery of loan approval.
Yeah.
Who are we trying to impress here, and how do we do it?
So you might think the loan officer is the key decision maker, but the real power actually lies with the underwriter. They're the ones who analyze your financial profile and determine whether you're a good risk for the lender.
Okay, so the loan officer is more like the messenger, and the underwriter is like the judge and jury.
Hmm.
Got it. And what are these underwriters? What are they most concerned with?
Well, their top priority is minimizing risk for the lender. Remember, it's better for them to reject a potentially risky loan than to approve one that might go bad. So they're looking for borrowers who, demonstrate financial stability, responsibility, and a strong likelihood of actually repaying that loan.
Makes sense. So how do we crack this code and increase our chances of getting that sweet, sweet loan approval?
The book outlines a few actionable steps you can take. First, build relationships with local banks. Establishing that trust and rapport before you even need to borrow money can really go a long way.
It's like building a safety net. What else can we do to up our chances?
Focus on boosting that credit score. Pay your bills on time, reduce your credit card debt, and just regularly monitor your credit report. Lenders see a high credit score as a sign of financial responsibility, right? Also, managing your debt-to-income ratio. Lenders want to see that you can comfortably handle your existing financial obligations before taking on more debt.
It's not just about a good income. It's about demonstrating that you're responsible with your money. Okay, anything else?
Having a stable employment history is another key factor. Lenders definitely prefer borrowers with consistent income. Again, it indicates a lower risk of default.
And of course, having a sizable down payment can significantly increase your chances of getting approved. It shows the lender that you're serious about this and you're willing to put some skin in the game.
Exactly. The more you put down, the less risky that loan appears to the lender. Now, the book mentions a mysterious 12-digit code that's crucial for loan approval. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but let's just say it holds the key to unlocking really favorable loan terms and could potentially save you a ton of money over the life of your loan.
Oh, a cliffhanger. Well, I guess our listener will have to dive into the book to uncover the secrets of that 12-digit code. But for now, let's move on to another skill that is just so critical for any real estate investor negotiation. And the book makes this really fascinating comparison between real estate negotiation and Captain Sullenberger's incredible landing of U.S. Airways Flight 1549 on the Hudson River.
Oh, the miracle on the Hudson, they call it. Wow, that's a really powerful analogy. So, what parallels does the book draw between Sully's heroic actions and the world of real estate?
The book really highlights Sully's years of experience and training. That's what allowed him to stay calm and make those split-second decisions
Yeah.
under immense pressure. And similarly, successful real estate negotiation requires preparation, knowledge, and the ability to think on your feet.
So it's not just about being a smooth talker. It's about having a deep understanding of the market, the property, and your own investment goals. So what are some tips that the book offers for mastering the art of negotiation?
One thing the book emphasizes is that a counteroffer from a seller isn't actually a rejection. It's more of an invitation to, keep negotiating. It's an opportunity to find a win-win where both parties feel good about the deal.
That's a great way to reframe the counteroffer process. Instead of looking at it as this adversarial back and forth, it's a more collaborative effort to find an outcome that works for everyone.
Right.
What are some of the key areas that are typically negotiable in a contract?
Of course, you've got the purchase price, that's the most obvious, but you can also negotiate things like closing costs, repairs, credits for those repairs, and even the possession date. So it's about understanding those nuances of the contract and being willing to explore different options.
So it's more than just like haggling over the price. It's about using all the different levers within the contract to your advantage. What other negotiation tips does the book have?
Preparation is key. Go into the negotiation with a clear understanding of your goals, your budget, and most importantly, your walkaway point. Know your limits and be willing to walk away if the deal just doesn't make sense for you.
And like we learned from Captain Sully, staying calm under pressure is so important. It's easy to get caught up in the emotions of the negotiation, but keeping a level head and avoiding those like impulsive decisions will serve you well.
The book also highlights the importance of really listening to the seller, understanding their motivations and their concerns.
It's about building that rapport, finding that common ground, remembering that you're not adversaries, but like potential partners in this transaction. What else should we keep in mind?
Don't be afraid to walk away. If the deal doesn't make sense, it just doesn't make sense. It's much better to miss out on a bad deal than get stuck with a property that ends up, draining your resources.
That is a very crucial reminder. And finally, the book emphasizes the importance of making the seller feel good about that negotiation.
A positive experience makes the whole transaction go so much more smoothly for everyone involved.
Yeah.
All right, so we've covered mindset, team building, financing, and negotiation. A lot of crucial elements of successful real estate investing. But before we jump into the nitty-gritty of like property ownership and management, we need to talk about due diligence. And the book makes this really intriguing comparison between due diligence and uncovering an art forgery.
That's an interesting comparison. So what's the connection there between due diligence and art forgery?
It's about making sure you're buying what you think you're buying. Due diligence is like peeling back those layers of a property's history to reveal any hidden problems or surprises that might be lurking beneath the surface.
So how do we avoid buying a fake? What are those essential steps for like really thorough due diligence?
It all starts with a really thorough inspection, and I'm not just talking about a quick walkthrough. You need a qualified inspector who will meticulously examine every nook and cranny of that property.
The book stresses that it's not just about identifying problems, but understanding the why behind them. Like, is crack in the wall just a minor cosmetic issue, or is it a sign of like a much bigger structural problem?
Right, and a qualified inspector will be able to help you figure out the severity of any issues and estimate the cost of those repairs. That information is super important for your decision making. Now, a general home inspection is crucial, but the book also talks about those specialized inspections, depending on the property and the location.
Yeah, like a pest inspection to see if there's any termite damage. That can be a huge headache.
Right. And environmental assessments are super important, especially for older properties. They can detect like asbestos, lead paint, mold, all of that stuff can pose some serious health risks and require specialized remediation.
And don't forget about the sewer scope inspection. That can reveal any hidden problems with the sewer line, which could lead to some really expensive repairs down the road.
Absolutely. It's all about being proactive and catching those potential problems before they turn into really expensive nightmares.
Now, all of that inspection info, it's not just for your peace of mind. It can also be used as leverage when you're negotiating.
Oh, you're right. If the inspection finds some significant issues, you can use that information to negotiate a lower price, ask the seller to make those repairs, or even ask for credits to cover the cost of those repairs.
So it's all about being informed, empowered, and using those inspection findings to your advantage. All right, we've talked about shifting your mindset, building your A-team, securing that financing, mastering negotiation, and conducting thorough due diligence. So what's next on this real estate investing adventure?
Well, now it's time to actually experience owning and managing rental properties. You ready to step into the shoes of a landlord?
Welcome back to our deep dive into the book on rental property investing. Last time, we left off on the edge of actually owning a property, becoming landlords, after we finished our due diligence like real estate detectives. So now let's get into what it's really like to own and manage those rental properties.
Yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? Where those dreams of passive income, financial freedom are put to the test. And this book doesn't sugarcoat things. It acknowledges that even brilliant minds at NASA can make mistakes. Like, remember when they accidentally taped over the original moon landing footage?
Oh, yeah. I guess even the best of us have our oops moments. So what kind of mistakes are we talking about here in the world of real estate?
Well, the author compares choosing the wrong rental property to, like, choosing the wrong spouse. It's a decision that can lead to years of headaches and financial strain. So the section is all about, giving you the knowledge to avoid those pitfalls and really setting yourself up for success.
So let's talk red flags. What are some of those common problems that just scream run away when you're looking at a potential rental property?
The book starts with something surprisingly simple: bad smells. A bad odor might seem like an easy fix, but it can be a major turnoff for potential tenants and sometimes a sign of something, deeper.
So it's not just about the aesthetics, it's about figuring out what that smell is telling you about the property's history. What kind of smells should we be wary of?
Musty smells can indicate moisture problems, which could lead to mold. And that's a major health hazard and costly to fix. Sewage smells, that's another red flag, big time. Plumbing issues, sewer line problems.
So our noses are like
Huh.
detectives, sniffing out trouble. What else should we watch out for?
Another thing is deferred maintenance. Peeling paint, overgrown lawns, visible damage. Those are all signs that a property has been neglected. And while they might seem cosmetic, they can often indicate bigger problems that have just been ignored.
So a seemingly small issue, like a cracked window, could actually point to a bigger problem. Foundation issues, things like that. What other potential deal breakers does the book talk about?
Major system issues. Problems with the roof, plumbing, electrical, or HVAC system, definitely things to watch out for. Those repairs can be really expensive.
And speaking of expensive, let's not forget the foundation, the literal bedrock of the property. Those problems can be a nightmare to fix, financially and logistically.
No kidding. The book advises a lot of caution when looking at properties with any potential foundation issues. Always better to be safe than sorry and get an inspection by a structural engineer.
So those are the more obvious red flags. Are there any problems that are a bit more under the radar, less obvious but equally troublesome?
The book actually tells this funny story, but it's a cautionary tale about a driveway hoarder, neighbor. It highlights those potential headaches you can run into with shared driveways. It's a good reminder that issues with property access, those boundaries, it can lead to some, frustrating disputes and legal issues.
So it's not just about the property itself, but also the surrounding environment, potential conflicts with neighbors. What other things should we be aware of?
Unpermitted work.
Yeah.
If a previous owner did additions or renovations without permits, that can lead to some serious legal and financial headaches down the line. You might be required to bring the work up to code, which can be super expensive.
Yikes. So always check with the building department, make sure everything's been done by the book. What about zoning issues? How can those affect a potential rental property?
Zoning laws, those dictate how you can use a property. So, restrictions can limit your rental potential, affect the value, even prevent you from making certain changes in the future.
So you're saying due diligence also means understanding those zoning laws, making sure the property aligns with how you want to use it. Any other words of wisdom about those potential pitfalls of owning a rental property?
One thing the book really emphasizes is evaluating the neighborhood carefully. Walk around, observe those surrounding properties, and if you can, talk to the neighbors, get a feel for the community. Remember, a bad neighbor can make your life miserable, and it can quickly turn that dream investment into a nightmare.
Okay, so we've got to be real estate detectives, gathering clues, piecing together a complete picture of the property, its surroundings, all of it. Now, let's say we've found a property, it passes the test, everything looks good, smells good, foundation is solid, neighbors are friendly. What's next?
Well, let's talk property management, that art of maximizing your rental income while minimizing your stress. You ready for this?
Yeah, this is where things get real, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And the book makes a really important point. Managing rental properties, it's a business, not just a hobby. It requires systems, processes, a clear understanding of your responsibilities.
So no more winging it?
Nope. Got to approach this with the same level of, professionalism as any other business venture.
All right, so what are the essential elements of being a good property manager?
Well, the book walks you through those fundamental tasks, starting with finding and screening tenants. Advertising showings, background checks, references, all that good stuff.
So you got to be selective, finding tenants that are responsible, reliable, and, financially stable.
Definitely. Your tenants are the lifeblood of your rental business. Choosing the right ones can make or break your success. The book also talks about having a solid lease agreement. It's like the roadmap for a smooth landlord-tenant relationship.
It makes sense. A clear lease agreement, that can prevent so many headaches down the road. What are some of those, key elements that should be in there?
It should specify the rent amount, the due date, late fees. It should outline who's responsible for what in terms of maintenance and repairs, and things like pet policies, guests, noise restrictions.
Setting those expectations up front is so important. So once you have tenants in place, what are some of those ongoing tasks you're looking at?
Well, collecting rent, obviously. The book talks about setting up a really clear, consistent process and how to handle those late payments, addressing any issues professionally and promptly.
Right, because a missed rent payment, that can really throw off your cash flow. What else is part of that property management umbrella?
Property maintenance. That's an ongoing responsibility.
Right.
Responding to routine requests, handling emergency repairs. You got to be responsive to those tenant
So
needs.
it's a balancing act, being attentive, but also protecting your investment.
Exactly. And don't forget about preventative maintenance. That can save you so much money down the line.
Now, dealing with tenants is one thing. What about the financial side?
Oh, the book gets deep into that. Tracking your income and expenses, prepping for tax season, maximizing those deductions.
So it's not just about collecting rent, it's about understanding those financials, running a business, basically.
Exactly. And this is where having a good accountant can be super helpful. They can set up a proper bookkeeping system, make sure you're taking advantage of all those tax breaks you deserve.
Speaking of tax breaks, I'm sure our listener wants to know about the 1031 exchange, that tax strategy that lets you defer paying capital gains taxes when you sell one property and buy another. Does the book explain how that works?
It sure does. There's a whole section dedicated to it, explaining how it works, how to execute it successfully. It's a powerful tool.
Can you give us a quick rundown, like how it works and why it's so good for real estate investors?
Okay, imagine you sell a property. You made a nice profit. Instead of paying taxes on that profit right away, a 1031 exchange lets you reinvest those funds into another property, and you defer those taxes.
So you're basically rolling your profits into a new investment without giving Uncle Sam a cut right away. What's the catch?
Well, there are specific rules, regulations. You have to follow them to qualify. Strict timelines, requirements. It's a bit complex, needs careful planning, but the tax savings, they can be huge, especially if you want to build a big portfolio.
It's like this power tool that can supercharge your wealth building journey. Now, before we move on to some of those more advanced strategies, I wanted to go back to property management for a minute, specifically that decision, self-manage or hire a pro.
Ah, yes, a big decision. And the book gives some great insights to help you figure out which path is right for you. Let's start with DIY, self-management. What are the upsides?
Well, the most obvious is saving money. You handle everything yourself, from finding tenants to collecting rent, repairs, no fees for a property manager.
Big plus, especially if you're on a budget. What else is good about self-management?
More control. You get to vet potential tenants, handle maintenance how you want, maintain a closer relationship with your tenants.
That can be appealing, especially for people who like being hands-on. But it's not all sunshine and roses. What are some of the downsides?
Time commitment. It can be a lot, especially if you have multiple properties or tenants that need a lot of attention. You're responsible for everything, and you got to be available at all hours.
Yeah, it's not just collecting rent. You're on call 24/7, dealing with unexpected issues, tenant emergencies. If you're not ready for that, it can get overwhelming fast.
Exactly. And what about difficult tenants?
Ooh, that could be a real challenge,
Well,
especially if you're new to this or don't have that experience with conflict resolution. Evicting a tenant, that's a whole legal process, very stressful.
so self-management, it requires not just time and organization, but the ability to handle those tough situations.
Okay, so what about the flip side? Hiring a professional property manager.
Well, the biggest advantage is peace of mind. You're basically offloading all those time-consuming, stressful tasks to someone who knows what they're doing.
It's like having a dedicated team, handling everything, so you can focus on other things. Right. They bring expertise, experience. They know those local landlord-tenant laws. They have connections with contractors. They can negotiate better prices for repairs.
So they're like your one-stop shop for all things property management.
Exactly. They maximize your income, protect your investment, and they can help minimize those vacancy rates, find qualified tenants quickly. They also handle tenant issues more effectively, diffuse those potential conflicts before they become big problems.
They're like managing the relationship, creating a smoother experience for both landlords and tenants. So of course there's a cost involved, right?
There is. They usually charge a percentage of the monthly rent, which can, cut into your profits, especially if you have a lot of properties.
And you're giving up a bit of that control, aren't you?
You are. You have less direct contact with your tenants, and you rely on their judgment for decisions about repairs. It's a trade-off. Convenience for control.
So how do you know which path is right for you?
The book says you need to consider your situation, your goals, your personality. Are you hands-on? Do you have the time? Do you want to handle all of that?
And it probably depends on the property too, right? Like if it's far away or if it's a really big, complicated property, hiring a professional might be a good idea.
It's not one size fits all. Weigh the pros and cons and go with what works for you. Now, regardless of which path you choose, there are some fundamental principles of good property management that apply to both. What are some of those key takeaways from the book?
It really emphasizes setting those clear expectations with tenants about paying rent, taking care of the property, and being responsive to their needs.
Communication is key. Be proactive. Be a responsive landlord. That can really help you build a positive relationship with your tenants and minimize conflict.
And happy tenants, they're more likely to stay, pay rent on time, take care of the place, and renew their leases. So that means a smoother, more profitable investment for you.
Right. The book also gives some practical tips for attracting and keeping those good tenants. Create a clean, inviting space, competitive rental rates, amenities that appeal to your target market, things like that.
It's not just about filling a vacancy, it's about finding the right tenants, those who will appreciate the property. Now, of course, even with the best tenants, sometimes things happen, like late rent, property damage. What does the book say about navigating those tricky situations?
It gives good advice on how to handle those things fairly and effectively. Follow the legal procedures, document everything, and don't be afraid to seek professional advice if you need it.
So be prepared for the unexpected. Have a plan. Protect yourself. Now, before we jump to maximizing rental income, I wanted to touch on the legal stuff. The book has a great overview of all the landlord-tenant laws, lease agreements, evictions. It's important to understand your rights and responsibilities.
It's like a legal crash course for landlords.
Yeah.
It talks about using a solid lease agreement, following the proper eviction procedures, complying with fair housing laws.
So you got to be a savvy business person, but also a responsible landlord.
Exactly. And if you're ever unsure about anything legal, talk to an attorney.
Okay, now let's get into maximizing your rental income, building long-term wealth. This book covers so many strategies like raising rents, reducing expenses, leveraging tax benefits.
This is where the magic happens. Let's start with rent increases. They're inevitable, but they can also cause some friction with tenants if they're not handled well. What does the book suggest?
Do your research. Find out what the going rate is in your area and justify those increases. If property taxes went up, if your maintenance costs increased, if you've made improvements to the property.
So don't just randomly raise the rent. Explain it to your tenants.
Right. Transparency and communication, those go a long way. Now let's talk about saving money. Cutting those expenses is key, but you got to do it strategically.
Right. You don't want to compromise the quality of your property or make your tenants unhappy. So what are some good cost-cutting measures? The book mentions things like negotiating lower insurance premiums, looking into those energy-efficient upgrades to save on utilities,
Being mindful of your expenses.
and being proactive. Preventative maintenance, for example. That can prevent those bigger, more expensive repairs down the line.
Okay, now keeping good tenants, that's so important. How do you keep those vacancy rates low?
Be responsive. Address those maintenance requests quickly, professionally. Build a sense of community in your property.
Treat them with respect, make it a nice place to live, build that positive relationship. Makes sense.
Happy tenants, they stick around. So less turnover for you, which means more stable income. Okay, now let's talk about property upgrades. Making those strategic improvements can really increase the value of your property, attract those higher paying tenants. What kind of upgrades should we be thinking about?
Right, so you want upgrades that will give you a good return on your investment.
The book says to focus on those upgrades that really appeal to your target market. Enhance the appeal of your property. Fresh paint, new floors, updated light fixtures, or even bigger things like kitchen and bathroom remodels.
It's about understanding what tenants value, making smart investments.
Right. And always consider how cost-effective the upgrade is going to be. Some things are relatively cheap, but make a big difference. Others are a bigger investment, but might not give you as much back. Do your homework.
So research, planning, that's all part of it. Okay, let's move on to financing, a crucial aspect of real estate investing, especially when you're trying to grow your portfolio.
The book does a great job of breaking down all those different financing options. Conventional mortgages, private loans, and those more creative strategies like seller financing.
So it's like a crash course in real estate finance. Can you give us an overview of those different options? Like, what are the pros and cons?
Conventional mortgages, those are usually the go-to for first-time home buyers. They're generally more affordable, lower interest rates, longer repayment terms, but they're harder to qualify for.
So you need good credit, stable income, all that. What about private loans?
Those are often easier to qualify for, but the interest rates are higher and the terms are shorter, so they're more expensive in the long run.
So they're good for short-term things like flipping properties.
Exactly. You repay the loan quickly after you sell. What about seller financing? Have you ever considered that?
I've heard of it, but I'm not really sure how it works.
The seller of the property acts as the lender. They give you the loan to buy the property, so they get a steady stream of income from those loan payments, and the buyer doesn't have to go through a bank.
Interesting. So who would that be a good option for?
Buyers who don't qualify for those traditional loans or who are looking for more flexibility, but it's really important to review those terms carefully, make sure everything's fair and legal.
Makes sense. And what about those lease options?
Those are also called rent-to-own agreements. You lease the property, but you have the option to buy it later. So it's like a test drive for home ownership.
So you can live there, build equity, and then hopefully buy it later when you're ready.
Right. You get into the property with a smaller upfront investment, potentially lock in the price for the future. But again, make sure you understand all the details of that agreement.
Okay, so it's all about figuring out which financing option fits your needs, your goals, and your financial situation.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to get creative. Okay, now let's talk about one of the biggest perks of real estate investing: tax benefits.
Oh, yes, this is the good stuff. The book covers so many deductions for real estate investors. Depreciation, mortgage interest, property taxes, operating expenses. It's like a whole world of tax savings.
This is a must-read for any investor. Real estate can be such an attractive investment because of these tax benefits.
Give us a quick rundown. What are some of those key deductions?
Depreciation. You can deduct a portion of the cost of the property over its useful life. So even though the property might be going up in value, you get to deduct a chunk of that cost each year.
So you're lowering your taxable income, which frees up cash flow?
Exactly. And it's not just the property itself. You can also depreciate certain improvements you make: appliances, flooring, landscaping.
So keep track of all of that because it can add up. What else can we deduct?
Mortgage interest. You can deduct the interest you pay on those loans, and not just your primary mortgage, but the interest on loans for your rental properties too. Property taxes, another big one. You can deduct those too.
Wow, it's like a built-in tax break.
It is. And don't forget about all those operating expenses: insurance, repairs, advertising, even property management fees. Keep those receipts.
Get yourself a good accountant. They'll make sure you're getting all those deductions you deserve. Now, earlier we talked about the 1031 exchange, that strategy for deferring capital gains taxes. Can we dig into that a little more?
Definitely. It's a powerful strategy, but there are a lot of rules. Like, you have to find a like-kind property to exchange into. It has to be a similar type of property. So you can't trade your rental for a boat.
Okay, so it has to be another investment property. Got it.
And you have to identify that replacement property within 45 days of selling your old property. And then you have to actually buy it within 180 days.
Wow, so there's a lot of pressure to find that new property quickly.
There is. That's why it's so important to work with a qualified intermediary. They'll help you navigate all of that. Now, have you heard of cost segregation? It's another tax saving strategy the book talks about.
I don't think so. What is that?
It's a way to, like, break down the purchase price of a property. You allocate it to different components like the land, the building, personal property. And that can really lower your taxable income, especially in those first few years of ownership.
So you're getting bigger deductions sooner.
Right. It's a really smart strategy, especially if you've recently bought a property or if you've made some big improvements. Okay, let's touch on those legal aspects one more time before we wrap up. The book really hammers home the importance of knowing your rights and responsibilities as a landlord and working with legal professionals if you need to.
This is the stuff that can be a bit overwhelming, especially for new landlords.
It is. The book covers everything from leases to evictions to fair housing laws. It's about operating legally and ethically.
So let's start with those lease agreements. What needs to be included in a lease to make sure it's legally sound?
You need all the names, the address of the property, how long the lease is, the rent amount, the security deposit, outline who's responsible for repairs.
It's like that contract we talked about earlier, making sure everyone is on the same page, preventing those misunderstandings.
Exactly. And make sure it complies with your local laws. Now, evictions, No one wants to deal with it, but sometimes you have
Okay,
to.
what's the right way to handle that?
Follow those procedures. Give the tenant written notice. Give them a chance to fix the issue. And then, if you need to, you can file that eviction lawsuit.
So it's not as simple as just telling them to leave.
Nope. There's a whole process. Document everything in case you need to go to court. Now, fair housing laws, those are super important. They protect people from discrimination.
So everyone has an equal opportunity to rent based on their qualifications.
Exactly. Treat everyone fairly. Use the same screening criteria. Be careful about the language you use in your advertising. Make reasonable accommodations for those with disabilities. Create a welcoming environment. And if you have any questions, get advice from an attorney.
Okay, now insurance. You got to protect your investment.
Right, like a safety net. What kind of insurance do we need for our rental properties?
You need property insurance to cover damage to the building itself, fires, storms, vandalism, and liability insurance in case someone gets injured on your property.
So property insurance protects the building, and liability insurance protects you. Exactly. And depending on your situation, you might need other types of coverage too. Flood insurance, for example, if you're in a flood zone, or umbrella insurance for extra liability protection.
All right, welcome back to our final deep dive into the book on rental property investing. We've covered a lot of ground. We've talked mindset, built our team, tackled financing, and really dug into the nitty-gritty of property management. But now let's focus on maximizing those profits, turning those rental properties into real wealth-building machines.
This is where things get really exciting, transforming from landlord to like a savvy investor.
Mhm.
And the book has a ton of strategies to help us do just that. So where do we begin?
Well, the book starts with a bit of a surprise. It says one of the keys to finding those really profitable deals is to actually look for properties that have problems.
Wait, what? That sounds counterintuitive. Why would we want a property that's just a headache waiting to happen?
Because, as the book explains, most people, they run away from those properties, the ones with obvious issues. And that means less competition for you, the savvy investor, and potentially a much better deal.
Ah, so it's about seeing the potential where others just see problems, okay? So how do we turn those problems into profits?
The book breaks down 8 common property problems that can actually be opportunities in disguise. Remember earlier we talked about bad smells being a red flag? Well, the book suggests that those odors can actually be a golden opportunity.
Yeah, while a bad smell might scare away most buyers, a smart investor sees a chance to negotiate a lower price. Then you just fix the problem. A good cleaning, some paint, new carpets.
So those bad smells are often just a perception problem, not a sign of a major issue.
Right. You get rid of the smell, the property is instantly more appealing, higher value. What other problems can we turn into profit?
Deferred maintenance is another one. Things like peeling paint, an overgrown yard, those things that make a property look neglected. Most buyers, they don't want to deal with that.
And that gives you leverage. You can get a better price because you're willing to put in a little work.
It's about knowing what's an easy fix and what's a sign of a bigger issue. And by taking care of those smaller things, you're showing your tenants that you care about keeping the property in good shape.
Exactly. And that can go a long way when it comes to attracting good tenants and keeping them happy, which means a more stable investment for you. Now, the book also talks about a specific strategy for adding value, converting two-bedroom units into three-bedroom units.
Yeah, that seems like a good way to increase your rental income, especially in places where those larger units are in high demand. So how does that work? What do investors need to consider before adding a bedroom?
Well, the key is to find properties where the layout makes it easy to do the conversion. Maybe there's a den you can convert, or an office space, or sometimes you can add a small addition.
So you're not doing a major renovation, just utilizing the space you have.
Right. But you do have to consider things like zoning laws, building codes, make sure it's allowed, and make sure there's actually a demand for three-bedroom units in the area.
So due diligence is important, even for something that seems simple, like adding a bedroom. Okay, now let's talk about the different types of rental properties out there. The book does a really good job of explaining the pros and cons of each type so you can choose what's right for you.
Yeah, it's like a menu of options, different levels of risk, different potential returns, something for everyone.
Let's start with single-family homes. Those are popular, especially for new investors. What are the good things and the not-so-good things about investing in those?
Well, they're generally easier to understand and manage. They appeal to a lot of tenants, families, people who want more space.
So they can be a good option if you don't want to be too hands-on with management.
Right. But the downside is that they usually don't generate as much cash flow as, say, multifamily properties, especially in those really expensive markets.
So you might not build wealth as quickly with single-family homes. What about multifamily properties? Those duplexes, triplexes, apartment buildings.
Those have the potential for more cash flow because you have multiple units, but they are more work to manage, dealing with multiple tenants.
So you get more money, but you also get more responsibility.
Okay, and what about commercial properties?
Now, those are a whole different ballgame. We're talking retail spaces, office buildings. They can be really profitable, but they're also riskier. And you need a lot of knowledge to invest in those successfully.
So not for beginners.
Definitely not. It's a whole different world. You need to understand those market dynamics, the lease structures, the financials.
So the book says know your limits.
Right.
Stick with what you know.
Exactly. Now, once you've figured out what type of property you want, you need to decide where to invest. And the book really emphasizes that not all markets are created equal.
Location, location, location. That's what they always say. So how do you choose the right place? What should you be looking for? Strong economy. Look for places with job growth, population growth, a diverse mix of industries. Those are signs that there will be a demand for rental properties.
So you're looking for places where people are moving to, where there are jobs. Makes sense.
And then look at the specific neighborhood. Is it close to transportation, schools, parks? Those things make a difference to tenants.
So you want a place that's desirable, where people will pay to live.
Exactly. And don't forget about the local laws and regulations. Those can impact your bottom line.
Right, because different places have different rules about landlords and tenants. So do your research.
Always do your research. Okay, now you've got your market. How do you find those great properties? The book says you got to be proactive. Don't just wait for deals to come to you.
So how do you go about finding those hidden gems?
Network. Talk to other investors, real estate agents. They often know about properties before they're even listed.
What about those real estate auctions or foreclosures?
Those can be good too. But be careful. Do your research. Know what you're getting into. You could also try direct mail marketing. Send letters to homeowners in your target area. Some of them might be interested in selling, even if they haven't listed their property.
So many different strategies. All right, you found a property. It looks good. What's next?
Time to crunch the numbers. Make sure it's actually a good deal.
So this is where your inner financial analyst comes out to play.
Right. The book have a whole framework for evaluating properties, looking at the cash flow, the return on investment, the cap rate. It's all about making sure the numbers make sense for you.
So can you give us a quick explanation of those financial terms? What do they mean, and how do you use them to evaluate a property?
Okay, cash flow. That's the money you have left over after you pay all your expenses. So you want a positive cash flow. That means you're making money each month. Return on investment, or ROI, is a way to measure how profitable your investment is. Basically, how much money are you making compared to how much you put in?
Got it. So a higher ROI is better.
Exactly. Then there's the cap rate, or capitalization rate. That compares the property's income to its value. So a higher cap rate usually means a better potential return.
Okay, and what about net operating income? I've heard that term before.
That's your income minus your operating expenses. So it shows how profitable the property is without taking into account your mortgage payments.
Okay, so it's all about understanding those numbers, making sure the property is a good investment.
Right. But it's not just about the numbers. You also need to think about the condition of the property, the potential for it to increase in value, and how it fits into your overall investment strategy.
So it's about making smart choices based on your goals. All right, the numbers look good. You're ready to make an offer.
Now it's time to negotiate. The book has a lot of great advice on how to craft a good offer, one that works for you and the seller.
It's all about that leverage again, knowing when to walk away.
Right. Don't get emotionally attached to a property. There are always other deals out there. Be patient and stick to your plan.
Okay, so we've talked about finding properties, analyzing those deals, making offers. What about financing? That can be the scariest part, especially for new investors.
I agree, but the book does a great job of explaining all those different options. Mortgages, private loans, even those creative strategies like seller financing.
So many choices. Let's break it down. Let's start with conventional mortgages. Those are probably the most familiar to people.
Yeah, those are the loans you get from banks. They're usually the most affordable, but they're also the hardest to qualify for. You need good credit, a steady job, a decent down payment.
So they're good if you're financially stable. What about those private loans?
Those are easier to get, but they're more expensive, higher interest rates. so they're better for short-term investments, like flips.
Okay, and you mentioned seller financing. Can you explain how that works again?
The seller of the property becomes the lender. They give you a loan to buy the property.
So you're bypassing the bank completely.
Exactly. It can be a good option for both the buyer and the seller. But, as always, make sure you read that agreement carefully. And what about those lease options? Remember those?
Yeah, those are those rent-to-own agreements.
Right. It's like you're renting, but you have the option to buy the property later.
So it's a good way to get into a property when you're not quite ready to buy it outright.
Exactly.
Okay.
So once you've got that financing figured out, you're almost there. The closing process is next. That's where you finalize everything, sign all the papers, officially become the owner.
And the book recommends getting professional help for that part, right?
Definitely. A real estate attorney or a title company, they can make sure everything is done right, protect your interests.
All right, so you've closed on the property, the keys are in your hand, you're officially a landlord.
Time to put on your property manager hat. The book has a lot of advice about finding good tenants, collecting rent, handling maintenance, all of that.
It's a whole new chapter.
It is. Being organized, proactive, responsive, those are key. You need a system. You got to stay on top of things.
And don't forget about those tenants.
Absolutely. Build those relationships. Treat them well. If they're happy, they'll stay longer. They'll take care of the property. It makes everything easier for you.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the book on rental property investing, I think the biggest takeaway is that there's a lot to learn. It's not just about buying a property, it's about understanding the market, making smart financial decisions, managing your properties well, and building those relationships.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Real estate investing, it's a journey. And this book, it's a great roadmap. It's given us the knowledge, the strategies, but now it's up to you to take action. What are you going to do next? Start researching those markets, connect with other investors, maybe analyze a few properties.
There's a whole world of possibilities out there. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, the key to success in real estate is to never stop learning. We'll catch you next time.